Hey, day two. So the joint compound dried really nice. Probably hard to tell on camera. But honestly, I think you could probably just scrape this and it could be wallpapered over, but I'm going to do 2 coats on it. A lot of people would assume just go through and sand it. I don't want to sand it because I'm going to be skim coating over it again. And sometimes if you skim coat over sanded drywall, you'll get a bunch of bubbles. Way to eliminate those bubbles after you sand, you'd go over with a damp wet sponge, de-dust the entire work area before you skim. Since I did such a tight skim, I didn't put it too heavy. It's pretty good. So all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go through and scrape everything down. A little more effort on the lap marks. If your skim coat was really rough and ugly, then you would probably have to sand it down with like a 80 grit to 120 grit sandpaper. But if you did a nice tight skim coat, it's almost nice. So second coat on this would be good enough to wallpaper. If you're trying to skim coat to get perfection, you're going to have to sand in between every coat when you're using joint compounds. So first coat, let it dry, sand it with like 80 to 120 grit, skim coat it, let it dry. Then you'd sand the second coat, I'd say anywhere from like 100 to 150 grit. Let the second coat dry and then do a really tight skim third coat and then sand it with what they do is like 180 to 220 grit sandpaper to get nice perfect walls. But this is just 2 coat jobs. We're just doing 2 coats on this because they're going to wallpaper it. And I think the second coat's going overboard, but that's what we charge them to do, is just to skim it out twice. As you can tell in here, this texture is really rough orange peel. So first things first, get the tarps down. I already got my mud ready. I'm just using a regular joint compound. But I'm going to use a drywall knife, a 6-inch knife, or you can use your coating 10 or 12-inch knife. Just go and scrape everything. A little more effort into the angles, baseboard area, any chatters and stuff. Just go through everything. Scrape it. Just scrape it. Scrape it. One good thing about scraping versus sanding, we're not making a bunch of dust. I'm not making dust in the house. This looks like a office nursery room, so I don't want to make a bunch of dust in the customer's home. I don't want to put up plastic shield and close it. I don't want to wear dust masks. So the good option is just to do the scrape process, especially when there's furniture, nice carpet, stuff like that. So you want to just do the scrape, skim coat technique. But let's get to work. I'm going to flap in the jaws here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scrape everything. I'm going to start at the top, scrape everything. Once I get it all scraped out, basically like we did the first coat, I'm going to start at the top. Some guys like to go the opposite direction their first coat. I went this way. Some guys like to go the opposite way with their second coat. So that just fills in anything this way didn't do. Then you go cross it off that way. It doesn't matter. Up, down, side to side. You just do whatever's best. If you want to just stick to the rule book, if you want up and down with your first coat, go side to side with your second coat, or vice versa. Side by side, up and down. Just that way you fill in anything that the opposite direction didn't get in. Well, let's get to work. We're going to get this all scraped up. Since I'm reaching just a 8-foot wall, I'm just using a kick bucket, so no need to bring a big ladder in here. Just scrape it. Angle's rough. You're not sitting here scraping it like that. You're just giving a good once over. Go over every square inch of it. A little more effort around that base area because I don't want clumps of mud to the base area and the baseboard. A little extra detail around the light sockets. You don't want big clumps of mud on there. Making no dust, so just got a little bit of stuff that's falling to the ground on my masking, so no dust, airborne dust all over the place. A little more effort in the angles. Get any clumps of mud. So this is when I like to use joint compounds when I'm skimming out old walls. Joint compounds take overnight to dry, so they kind of shrink back. I didn't put on super heavy, so this is a nice, fairly smooth skim coat. So the second coat is just more imperfections. When I skim over this, I might get a couple bubbles here and there, but I'm not going to get as much since there's no sand involved. Also, drywall mud doesn't like to stick to dust. That's pretty good. And I'm ready to skim it out. I'm just using a 12-inch knife. I'm not using a big knife like I did for the first coat. A smaller knife, 10, 12-inch knife, you can control it and pull it tighter. We're just going to do a pull it tight, and we'll put on all my mud again as far as I can reach. As far as I can reach. I'm going to do like a 4 by 4 foot section. Reach as far as I can off my step bucket. That way I don't have to move it a few times instead of keep moving it every time I need to make a move. Go to the angle, make the angle clean. Sometimes if you want to make a nice angle, you can run your finger in the angle with the mud, and it's almost like you're caulking in the angle. You're basically filling in the angle, and that gives it a good finish. Keep on going. I want to put on as much mud as I can, as far as I can, until I have to move my step ladder. Always do your highs first and bring them down. Don't do your bottoms first and work top, because you do drop mud. Alright, got the mud on, 4 foot by 4 foot area. I'm going to do the angle up here too, the same. I'm going to run my finger, that's filling in that angle, so it gives it a good finish. Some people also like to wait till the mud dries and do a tight bead of caulking. You can do that too. So pull it anyway, we're pulling it tight. I'm not putting my knife down, I'm going to set it up like that because I'm going to be pulling it tight. Pull it tight. If you do chatters, see chatters go in that direction, then go the opposite direction. Opposite. It's just a tight skim coat, nothing to it. This is something anybody can do with some joint compound and a pan, 6-inch knife, and maybe a 12 or 10-inch knife. Simple skim out, do a wall at a time. Wallpapers, these new designs are becoming popular again, so a lot of people are doing accent walls, wallpaper walls. More popular than you believe. Some people also do skim out walls, like for projector TV. Sometimes you like to skim it out so you have a smooth wall for your projector screen to be on, and then they just paint it white for the projector. If you get a few bubbles, you can go the opposite direction, fill in the bubbles. You're always going to get bubbles. They're going to shrink back. Double check your work. I already did that section. I'm going to go ahead and do this bottom section. Double check that I didn't scrape that good. You can see a clump there, scrape that off. Same thing here. Just get your mud on. Of course, it's easier when you do the bottoms. You can make it more, cover more ground. So I'm going to do as much as I can. The one full pan of mud here, joint compound, thinned, creamy joint compound. Let's say like it's a real heavy pancake, creamy pancake batter consistency for skimming out with the second coat of this. Same thing here, I run my finger in an angle, just makes it nice and perfect. Alright, skim it up. Sometimes the base, you want to run your knife edge right to that base area so you're not taking a bunch of mud on the base. Skim it up. Alright, got that one section. I'm already more 1/3 done with this wall. So now I did this whole section. Now I'm going to move over. I'm going to try to do this again without disconnecting the wires. Since I'm in somebody's house, I don't want to disconnect their internet. I'm going to do this whole wall. It looks like I'm going to do 2 pans of mud. So that'd be awesome. Skim a whole wall with 2 pans of drywall joint compound. Same thing here in the angle on your finger. Perfect angle, nice and square. If you want to make perfection, you can sand it after this mud dries. It'll give you a perfect square 90-degree angle. Same thing here, cross it off. I have a little bit of mud here. So I'm going to have to go get another pan of mud. Take the extra mud I have in my pan. I only have a little bit in my pan, so I use my 6-inch knife. I'm going to do around the, they call it detail, around the light switches, the plugs, using my 6-inch knife, so I get real tight to these plugs. Pull it real tight. I'm just doing a second coat from this cable line for the modem. I'm just going to go around it so they don't have to disconnect it. It's easier to do it with a smaller knife around detail. 6-inch knife is a go-to knife for stuff like this. You're around this bottom one. And that's the way we use up our mud in our pan. Now I don't have to worry about the detail. Alright, let's go get some more mud. I did 1 pan of mud. I think 1 more pan of mud will be more than enough to finish up this wall. So let's go ahead and get some more mud. Alright, got another pan of mud. Same thing, just continue on. Continue on the fun. Always start at your tops. Bring it down, bring it down. All this for wallpaper. You could put wallpaper on a textured wall, you would just see the rough texture underneath the wallpaper, so that's why people like to skim it. Honestly, I think it's way too much work to do wallpaper, so you might want to think about it before you're going to install wallpaper. What needs to do to the walls, prep the walls for wallpaper. Bam, bringing down the tops, bringing them down. Look on the bottom here. Now, if you let this dry overnight, maybe you sand it. I would sand it tomorrow and then skim it out even again. You would have a perfectly smooth wall. So if that's what you're trying to do, is skim out your walls. Maybe you have a real rough texture or a texture one wall that doesn't match the rest of the walls. You can always skim it out. Basically skim it out smooth and let it be. I like skimmed out walls. I like smooth looking walls. You skim them out 3-4 times, you're basically going to skim out any imperfection in the walls. It depends on how much of a perfectionist you are and how many coats you're doing. 2 coat minimum, 3rd coat and 4th coat would give you perfection. A lot of bubbles here appearing, so I'm just going to go the opposite way. Just trowel it down, bubbles to disappear. That's the only problem with these joint compounds, is they leave bubbles. There's a lot of guys out there, they'll put like, I heard laundry detergent, soap in the mud to try to eliminate bubbles. I've seen it all, heard it all, but it's just part of skimming out walls. The mud has nowhere to go. It tries to soak in, especially if you're skimming over painted walls, especially gloss painted walls. The mud, instead of soaking in, all the bubbles are coming to the surface because it has nowhere to go. It's fine. That's what the 3rd coat would be, to skim over your bubbles, pits, and stuff you get. It just takes many coats to get that perfect level you're trying to do. If you're striving for perfected smooth wall, you'd have to sand in between each coat. This is just a wallpaper wall, so good enough. More pits here. This is a new bucket of mud I just mixed up, so that's why the color's a little different. And this brand here is even more pits. So some brands of joint compounds leave more bubbles than others. Nothing you can do about it. It's the glue, humidity, the heat, skimming over painted walls. This last part here, I'm just going to finish up with the little section here. And then we're pretty much done. Clean up. Hope I have enough mud here. I should just have just enough to finish up. I'm hoping. Finger in the angle, finger in the angle. That just fills in that angle. I'm not pushing a bunch of mud in there, I'm just running it. It's filling in that angle, deep angle. Alright, mud's on. Pull it tight, skim it tight. Skim it tight. I'm getting chatters that direction, so I'm going to go the opposite direction. If you get chatters going one direction, go the opposite. Go the opposite. Go the opposite. Let's finish up this little part here, and that's pretty much it. Simple. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I have several videos. Most of the videos I do are just drywall repairs, small jobs. I also do larger projects, but on large jobs I don't bring a camera with me and I don't have time to sit there and chit chat. On jobs like this that I have extra time, I'm able to record what I do, basically make a basic how-to-do video. I have several videos on my channel, many playlists, texture playlists, patching playlists, do-it-yourself drywall repairs. So if you haven't watched many of the videos, I have plenty. Some are not the greatest, some are even good. So it just depends on what kind of information you're looking for. I probably have it on my channel. I'm getting real tight here with the mud, so I'm going to scrape up every little bit and try to go the distance here. Because my mud bucket's downstairs in my truck, and I don't want to have to go down there for just one scoop of mud. So I'll even scrape the sides of my pan. We're not going to waste nothing. I think we're going to be right on the money here. Getting the edge of my pans, basically getting it all used up. So it just gave me just enough. Right on the money. Look at that. The finger in the angle. I like to run the finger too in the baseboard area. Just fills in all that stuff. Yeah, also like I was saying on my channel, there's several videos. So maybe you're trying to do patchwork, stuff like this. This is just a skimmed wall, no big deal. 2 pans of mud. I think for first coat I used 2, maybe 3 pans of mud, so 4 or 5 pans of mud. The joint compound, I ended up skimming out a whole wall. You get other mud on the wall, you can just take a damp rag and just get it off while it's wet. It's easier to get it off while it's wet. So now I'm just going to pull my masking. You want to take your sponge too, you can double check if this mud starts setting up. You can kind of take off that extra mud where it meets the base area. We don't want clumps of mud down by the base area. If you're striving for perfection, you would just let this dry overnight, and then you could sand it. But for me, I'm doing a wallpaper skim out only, so it doesn't have to be a level 5 smooth wall. It just has to be coated twice to fill in the rough, heavy splatter texture. Easy enough, skimmed out. I think the first day it took me 30-40 minutes. This took less than 30 minutes. So let this dry. I don't recommend, if you do wallpaper, to stick it right on the raw drywall mud, because sometimes that wallpaper has a lot of adhesion glue, and then if you ever change your mind down the road, because everybody always changes their mind 5 years down the road, You're like, what was I thinking with that wallpaper? I want to remove it. Well, if you stuck the wallpaper to the raw mud, it's going to be a bear to get off. I don't know if you ever seen horror stories or heard people trying to remove wallpaper and it won't come off. Well, it's because they stuck it to the raw drywall mud. This mud here is going to absorb all that glue. It's going to stick. It's going to be the best bond ever. So I recommend if you are going to wallpaper a wall, skim it out at least 1 or 2 coats, and then I would put a primer or a paint on it, especially a gloss paint. If you did a gloss paint on it after this and you put the wallpaper on, if you ever change your mind down the road, removing the wallpaper will come off probably with a damp sponge because you have a sealed wall with paint. It's sealed with a gloss, so the wallpaper will literally just peel off once you get the wallpaper wet. But if it's stuck to this raw mud, it's going to be a bear to get that wallpaper off, and you might have to skim coat over the wallpaper just to hide it because it won't come off the wall. But go ahead and clean up your area. Let this dry for 24 hours, anytime tomorrow thereafter. You can go through, you can sand it if you want or scrape it, and then primer, paint it up, and it'll look good. Good smooth wall. If you want it perfect, of course you would do another tight 3rd coat. But I think just by scraping it maybe and then primering it or painting it right now, we'll be ready for wallpaper anytime after that. But hey, please like this video. Please leave a comment.